The clash was terrible to behold. Lightning met wildfire. Structured spells collided with chaotic enchantments. The air itself seemed to tear and scream. Young wizards who had never killed before found themselves taking lives. Young witches who had been taught to heal found themselves breaking and destroying. The night Kola first saw Zara, the moon hung low over the baobab trees like a wounded eye watching the world below. He had come to the forbidden border, that thin strip of land where the wizard clans ended and the witch territories began. The air there tasted different. It carried the scent of herbs and night flowers that his people called cursed. Kola stood at the edge of the clearing, his dark robes moving in the wind like living shadows. The silver marks on his hands glowed faintly, the signs of his power as a young wizard of the Storm clan. He was not supposed to be here. No wizard was. The laws were older than memory itself. Wizards walked the path of structure and order. Witches embraced the wild and unknown. They were opposites. They were enemies. This was the way things had always been. But Kola had followed the strange pull in his chest for 3 nights now. Something called to him across the border, something he could not name or resist. Then he saw her. She emerged from between the ancient trees like a vision born from moonlight itself. Her skin was deep brown, rich as fertile earth. Her hair was wrapped in cloth of midnight blue, and her robes were the color of forest moss. But it was her eyes that stopped his breath. They were amber, like honey held up to the sun, and they saw right through him. Zara stopped when she noticed him. Her hand went to the small pouch at her waist where she kept her healing stones. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The night held its breath. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called out a warning. She should have run. He should have attacked. These were the rules. But instead, they stood there in the moonlight, 2 young souls caught between duty and something far more dangerous. Kola spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. He told her he meant no harm. He did not know why he had come. He only knew that something had drawn him here. Zara tilted her head, studying him with those impossible eyes. She told him that she too had felt the pull. For 3 nights, something had called her to this border. She had tried to ignore it, but the feeling only grew stronger. They talked until the first light of dawn began to paint the sky. They spoke of their lives, their fears, their dreams. Kola learned that Zara was a healer among her people, that she spent her days gathering herbs and tending to the sick. She learned that he studied the patterns of storms and lightning, that he wanted to understand the deep laws that held the world together. As the sun began to rise, they knew they had to part. But before they left, they made a promise. They would meet again in this same place, when the moon was full once more. That was how it began, with moonlight and whispers and a promise that would shake 2 worlds. The weeks that followed were the happiest and most terrifying of Kola's life. Each full moon, he would slip away from the Storm clan's great tower, moving through the night like a shadow among shadows. And each time, Zara would be waiting for him at the border, her smile like sunrise breaking through dark clouds. They met in secret, always careful, always watching for others who might discover them. They found hidden places where the ancient trees grew so thick that even moonlight struggled to reach the ground. There, in those sacred spaces, they shared their worlds with each other. Zara taught Kola about the healing arts, how to read the language of plants, how to feel the pulse of life in all living things. She showed him that magic was not just power and control, but also gentleness and growth. Her hands could draw poison from a wound, could call forth new life from dying soil. Kola showed Zara the beauty in patterns and structure. He taught her to see the hidden geometry in lightning strikes, the perfect mathematics in the spiral of a storm. His magic was sharp and precise, but in her presence it softened. He learned to weave his lightning into delicate shapes, to paint the sky with light just to see her smile. They fell in love slowly, like seasons changing. It was in the small moments. The way she laughed when he made shapes from lightning. The way he listened when she spoke of her dreams. The gentle touch of her hand on his arm. The weight of his cloak around her shoulders when the night grew cold. But always, beneath their joy, there lived a constant fear. They both knew what would happen if their peoples discovered their secret. The hatred between wizards and witches ran deeper than the roots of the oldest trees. It was woven into their histories, their songs, their very identities. To love across that divide was not just forbidden. It was unthinkable. Kola began to notice changes in himself. The other wizards commented on it. His master, Old Deo, asked him why he seemed distracted during lessons. His friend Tund wanted to know where he disappeared to on full moon nights. Kola made excuses, told careful lies, and felt guilt settle in his chest like stones. Zara faced similar questions. Her sister Nala grew suspicious. The other healers noticed how she seemed to glow with some inner light, how she hummed songs that no one recognized. Zara deflected their concerns with smiles and half-truths, but the weight of the secret grew heavier with each passing day. On their 6th meeting, Kola brought her a gift. It was a small crystal that he had shaped with his lightning magic, forming it into a perfect sphere that held captured light within. When Zara held it up to the moon, it glowed with soft blue radiance, like a piece of sky made solid. She cried when she saw it. She told him it was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever given her. Then she gave him her gift in return. It was a small pouch of herbs that she had gathered and blessed. She explained that it would protect him from harm, that she had woven her magic into every leaf and root. They held each other that night under the ancient trees, and they both understood that what they felt was real and deep and worth any risk. But they also knew that their time was running out. Secrets this big could never stay hidden forever. The storm was coming. They could both feel it gathering on the horizon. The first crack in their perfect secret came from an unexpected place. Kola's friend Tund followed him one night, curious about his mysterious disappearances. Tund was a loyal friend, but he was also a faithful wizard who believed in the old laws with all his heart. Tund did not see Kola and Zara together, but he saw enough. He saw Kola standing at the forbidden border, staring into witch territory with a look on his face that Tund had never seen before. It was a look of longing, of love, of hope. Tund went to the elders. He did not mean to cause trouble. He truly believed he was protecting his friend from some witch's enchantment. How else could he explain what he had seen? No wizard would go to the border of his own free will. Kola must be under some spell, some dark influence from the other side. The elders called Kola before them. They stood in their tower of stone and lightning, these old wizards with their stern faces and ancient power. Master Deo spoke for them all. He asked Kola directly if he had been meeting with a witch. Kola's first instinct was to lie. The denial formed on his tongue, ready to protect his secret, to protect Zara. But when he looked into Master Deo's eyes, he found he could not speak the words. The old wizard had been like a father to him. The thought of lying to that weathered face made something inside him break. So Kola told the truth. He spoke of Zara, of their meetings, of the love that had grown between them like a flower in impossible soil. He told them she was not evil, not dangerous. She was a healer who spent her days helping others. He told them that everything they believed about witches was wrong. The silence that followed his confession was louder than thunderclaps. Master Deo's face showed not anger, but deep sadness. The old wizard spoke slowly, his words carrying the weight of centuries. He told Kola that he did not understand what he had done. The hatred between wizards and witches was not born from misunderstanding. It was born from blood and betrayal that stretched back to the very beginning of their peoples. The other elders were less gentle. They spoke of corruption and contamination. They said that witch magic was like poison in the blood, that Kola had been compromised beyond saving. Some called for his immediate exile. Others suggested darker punishments. But Master Deo held up his hand for silence. He made a decision that he believed showed mercy. Kola would be confined to the tower under guard. He would be given time to break free from what they saw as the witch's enchantment. They would help him remember who he truly was. Meanwhile, on the other side of the border, Zara faced her own reckoning. Her sister Nala had noticed the protective charm she wore, a small piece of crystal that glowed with wizard magic. When confronted, Zara made the same choice Kola had. She could not bear to lie. The witch elders gathered in their sacred grove, a place where the oldest trees grew in a perfect circle. Elder Ife, the grandmother of the healing arts, listened to Zara's confession with an expression that was impossible to read. When Zara finished speaking, Ife spoke words that chilled her to the bone. She told Zara that she was not the first to be deceived by a wizard's tricks. Long ago, when the world was younger, wizards and witches had tried to coexist. But the wizards had betrayed that trust. They had used false friendship to learn the witches' secrets, then turned that knowledge into weapons. The war that followed had nearly destroyed both peoples. Ife said that this wizard, this Kola, was surely doing the same thing. He was using Zara's innocent heart to gain information, to learn the witch's weaknesses. The fact that Zara could not see this only proved how deep his deception ran. Zara tried to protest. She swore that Kola was genuine, that what they shared was real. But her words fell on ears hardened by centuries of distrust. The witch elders made their own decision. Zara would be kept in the sacred grove, protected from the wizard's influence. They would perform cleansing rituals to free her mind from his manipulation. And they would send scouts to watch the wizard territories, to learn what attack was being planned. In their separate prisons, Kola and Zara each cried out for the other. But their voices could not cross the distance between their worlds. What happened next would be debated and discussed for generations to come, but the truth of it would remain hidden, buried beneath lies and blood. A wizard patrol was attacked at the border. 3 young wizards were found dead, their bodies bearing the marks of witch magic. The evidence was undeniable. Poison in their veins that came from witch herbs. Burn marks that matched witch fire. And most damning of all, a piece of midnight blue cloth clutched in one dead wizard's hand. The same color that Zara wore. The wizards cried for vengeance. The death of their young ones demanded blood in return. Master Deo tried to counsel patience, to investigate further, but his voice was drowned out by calls for war. At the same time, across the border, a witch healing shrine was destroyed. The sacred plants were burned, the healing stones shattered. 2 young healers who had been tending the shrine were found unconscious, barely alive. When they woke, they spoke in broken whispers of wizards in dark robes, of lightning that struck without warning. The witches gathered their power and prepared for battle. Elder Ife's warnings about wizard treachery seemed proven true. This was exactly what she had feared. The wizard had gotten close to Zara to learn about their sacred places, and now the attacks had begun. Locked in the storm tower, Kola heard about the deaths and felt his heart turn to ice. He begged his guards to let him speak to the elders. When they finally allowed it, he stood before the council and swore with everything in him that Zara would never kill, never harm. She was a healer. She devoted her life to saving others. But the evidence spoke louder than his words. The piece of blue cloth was shown to him. It was identical to what Zara wore. The poison matched her healing herbs exactly. What other explanation could there be? Kola could not answer. He wanted to believe in Zara's innocence, but doubt began to creep into his heart like winter frost. Had he been deceived? Had everything between them been a lie? In the sacred grove, Zara faced the same terrible doubt. The wizards had attacked a healing shrine. They had nearly killed her friends. The survivors described the lightning, the dark robes, the cold precision of the assault. It matched everything Zara knew about wizard magic. When the elders asked if her wizard lover could have been involved, Zara wanted to scream her denial. But the question planted a seed of uncertainty. Had Kola been using her all along? Had his gentle words and soft touches been nothing but manipulation? Neither of them knew the truth. Neither of them could see the larger picture. Deep in a cave system beneath the borderlands, something ancient stirred and smiled. It had many names across many cultures, but in this land it was called Keem, the Eater of Peace. It was an entity old beyond measure, a being that fed on conflict and chaos. For centuries it had slept, but the love between Kola and Zara had awakened it. Their love had been pure and strong, a bridge between 2 peoples that had been enemies for so long. Such a thing was dangerous to Keem. If wizards and witches found peace, the entity would starve. It would fade back into the nothing from which it came. So Keem had acted. It had used its ancient power to create illusions, to frame both sides, to make each people believe the other had struck first. It had worn the shape of wizards to attack the healing shrine. It had worn the shape of witches to kill the wizard patrol. It had planted evidence and whispered suggestions into sleeping minds. And now, as war drums began to beat on both sides of the border, Keem grew stronger. The fear and anger and hatred feeding it like rich food after a long fast. The entity whispered to itself in the darkness, speaking words in languages that predated human tongue. The lovers would destroy each other. The peoples would go to war. And in the chaos and bloodshed that followed, Keem would feast until it was powerful enough to never sleep again. Everything was proceeding perfectly. The war began on a morning when the sky was the color of old bruises. Both armies met at the border, hundreds of warriors on each side, power crackling in the air like approaching lightning. The wizards came in their dark robes, their hands glowing with stored energy. They formed precise ranks, their magic organized and disciplined. At their head rode the war masters, the oldest and strongest of their kind. The witches emerged from the forest like spirits of nature itself. They wore robes in earth tones, their magic wild and flowing. They moved with the grace of wind through trees, unpredictable and fierce. Their elders stood at the front, power radiating from them in waves. Kola was brought to the battlefield in chains. The elders had decided he would watch what his actions had caused. They wanted him to see the price of forbidden love, to understand the depth of his betrayal. They told him that after the battle, he would be exiled forever, sent to wander alone until his days ended. Across the field, Zara was similarly bound. The witch elders had brought her to witness what the wizard's deception had led to. They wanted her to see clearly what happened when one trusted the enemy. After this day, they told her, she would spend her life in isolation, cut off from her people as punishment for her foolishness. When Kola's eyes found Zara across that terrible distance, something inside him shattered and reformed. Despite everything, despite the evidence and the doubt, seeing her face made the truth crystallize in his heart. She was innocent. He knew it with a certainty that went beyond reason. Whatever had happened, whoever had killed those wizards, it was not her. Zara looked back at him, and in her eyes he saw the same realization. She knew. The attacks, the violence, none of it had been his doing. They had both been framed, manipulated, turned against each other by something they did not yet understand. They tried to call out to each other, to warn their peoples that something was wrong. But their voices were lost in the roar of battle cries as the two armies charged. The clash was terrible to behold. Lightning met wildfire. Structured spells collided with chaotic enchantments. The air itself seemed to tear and scream. Young wizards who had never killed before found themselves taking lives. Young witches who had been taught to heal found themselves breaking and destroying. Kola watched in horror as Tund, his oldest friend, fell to a witch's curse. He watched as witches he had seen in the distance during his meetings with Zara were struck down by wizard lightning. Each death felt like a nail being driven into his soul. Zara wept as she watched her sister Nola take a wound that would leave her scarred forever. She cried out as young healers who had learned their craft beside her were consumed by wizard fire. The world was ending, and it was somehow her fault. As the battle raged, something changed in the air. The sky grew darker, though the sun had not moved. A cold wind began to blow from no particular direction, and in the space between the two armies, shadows began to gather and take shape. The entity Keem was manifesting. It had fed so well on the violence and hatred that it could now show itself to the physical world. It rose from the ground like smoke given form, like darkness made solid. It had no fixed shape, but seemed to shift and flow, sometimes looking almost human, sometimes utterly alien. When it spoke, its voice was the sound of breaking bones and dying hopes. It thanked the wizards and witches for their war, for their delicious hatred. It told them it had been starving for so long, but now, thanks to their conflict, it would be strong enough to spread across the entire land. It would poison other peoples, start other wars, feast forever on human suffering. And it laughed. The sound of its laughter made strong warriors fall to their knees, made battle-hardened elders weep like children. The fighting stopped. Both armies stared at the thing between them, finally understanding that they had been manipulated. The attacks, the evidence, all of it had been orchestrated by this creature to turn them against each other. Master Deo looked at Elder Ife across the battlefield. In that moment, centuries of hatred fell away, replaced by a shared horror at what they had allowed to happen. Keem spoke again, its voice dripping with mockery. It told them they were welcome to try to fight it, but it was too late. It had fed too well. Their war had made it powerful beyond their ability to defeat. The only way to stop it would have been to never fight at all, to choose love over hate, unity over division. Then the creature's attention turned to Kola and Zara. It looked at them with something like fondness. It told them they had been the key to everything. Their love had been so pure, so powerful, that it threatened Keem's very existence. So the entity had destroyed it, turned it into the fuel for war. It thanked them for their sacrifice. Keem's words hung in the air like poison. The entity began to move toward the nearest group of warriors, its form shifting and reaching like dark water seeking to drown them all. But before it could strike, two voices rang out in unison. Kola and Zara spoke the same word at the same time, a word of power in the old tongue that predated the split between wizards and witches. It was a word Kola had learned in his studies of ancient patterns. It was a word Zara had found in her healing texts. Neither had known the other possessed this knowledge. The word meant union. Their chains shattered. The magic that had bound them broke like glass under the weight of their combined will. They ran toward each other across the battlefield, past the frozen warriors, past the shocked elders, straight toward the manifesting entity. Keem laughed at their futile gesture. Two young lovers against an ancient being of chaos? It was meaningless. It was pathetic. Kola and Zara's hands met. The moment their fingers intertwined, power exploded outward in a wave of light that lit the dark sky. It was not wizard magic. It was not witch magic. It was something older, something that had existed before humans divided themselves into opposing factions. It was the magic of unity. The magic that came from genuine connection, from love that transcended boundaries, from two souls becoming more than the sum of their parts. The light burned Keem like acid. The entity screamed, a sound that shattered stones and split trees. It tried to flee back into the earth, back to the dark places where it had slept. But Kola and Zara did not let go. They walked forward together, their combined power growing with each step. Kola channeled the precision and structure of his wizard training. Zara channeled the wild growth and healing of her witch arts. Together, they wove something new, a magic that was both ordered and chaotic, both destructive and healing. Keema writhed and fought. It tried to tempt them, whispering that they could have power beyond measure if they just let it live. It tried to frighten them, showing them visions of what it would do to their peoples if they did not stop. It tried to divide them, suggesting that one of them should sacrifice the other to gain the strength to defeat it. But Kola and Zara were beyond such tricks now. They had already faced the worst that could happen. They had been torn apart, doubted each other, watched their peoples go to war. There was nothing left that could break what bound them together. They spoke together, their voices weaving around each other like songs in harmony. They told Keem that it could not exist in a world where love proved stronger than hate. They told it to return to the nothing, to sleep forever, to trouble their world no more. The light around them grew brighter and brighter until all the assembled warriors had to look away. In that brilliance, the entity called Keem screamed one final time. Then it simply ceased to be, burned away by a power older and stronger than its own ancient malice. When the light finally faded, Kola and Zara stood at the center of the battlefield, still holding hands. They were both exhausted, barely able to stand. But they were alive. They were together. And the entity that had nearly destroyed both their peoples was gone. Silence fell across the field like dew. Then, slowly, Elder Ife began to walk toward them. Master Deo did the same. The two elders met at the center, standing beside the young lovers. Ife spoke first. She said that she had been wrong. She had let old hatred blind her to present truth. These two young ones had done what generations of elders could not. They had found a way to bridge the divide, to create something new from the old conflict. Deo agreed. He said that perhaps the split between wizards and witches had never been meant to last forever. Perhaps it had always been intended as a temporary thing, a lesson that both peoples needed to learn before they could come together again. He looked at Kola and Zara, and his old eyes were bright with tears. He told them they had shown a path forward that no one had imagined possible. The other wizards and witches began to lower their weapons. They looked at each other across the battlefield, really looked, perhaps for the first time in centuries. They saw not monsters, not enemies, but people. People who were tired of fighting. People who wanted peace. The war ended not with a surrender, but with a slow, cautious reaching out. Wizards and witches who had been trying to kill each other moments before now stood together, examining wounds, offering help where they could. It would not be easy. Centuries of hatred could not be erased in a day. There would be setbacks and struggles, suspicions and fears to overcome. But for the first time in living memory, there was hope. Months passed. The border between wizard and witch territories remained, but it was no longer a wall of hate. It became instead a meeting place, a space where both peoples could come together to learn from each other. Kola and Zara built a small house right at the border, perfectly positioned between both worlds. It became a symbol of the new age. Wizards came to learn healing arts from Zara. Witches came to study structure and pattern from Kola. Slowly, carefully, the two magics began to interweave. They discovered something beautiful in that blending. Wizard precision could make witch healing more effective. Witch flexibility could make wizard spells more adaptable. The magic that emerged from their collaboration was more powerful and more useful than either tradition alone. Not everyone accepted the change. There were those among both peoples who clung to the old ways, who could not let go of ancient grudges. Some wizards left to form isolated enclaves where the old laws still held. Some witches retreated deep into the forest to maintain their traditional separation. But they were the minority. Most people, especially the young, embraced the new possibilities. They saw in Kola and Zara proof that the old divisions had been false, that strength came not from isolation but from unity. Tund, who had survived his wounds from the battle, became one of Kola's strongest supporters. He spent his days teaching wizard youth about the importance of questioning old assumptions. He spoke often of how his blind loyalty to tradition had nearly destroyed his best friend and started a war. His words carried weight because they came from genuine remorse and hard-won wisdom. Zara's sister Nala, scarred but alive, worked alongside her to establish healing centers where wizards and witches worked together. The combination of their techniques saved lives that would have been lost under the old ways. Diseases that had once been incurable were now treated with magic that drew from both traditions. Master Deo and Elder Ife became unlikely friends. They spent long evenings together, comparing notes, discussing magic, and marveling at how much they had both missed by refusing to see beyond their own traditions. They established a school where young wizards and witches learned side by side, studying both systems of magic as complementary rather than opposing forces. On the anniversary of the battle, both peoples gathered at the border for a ceremony of remembrance. They honored those who had died in the war, acknowledging the waste and tragedy of it all. But they also celebrated what had been gained. The end of an ancient conflict. The beginning of a new understanding. Kola and Zara stood before the assembled crowd. Zara spoke of how love had given them the courage to stand against fear. Kola spoke of how unity had given them the strength to defeat an enemy that neither people could have faced alone. Together, they planted a tree at the exact spot where they had first met. It was a special tree, one that grew from seeds both wizard and witch had blessed. Its roots would grow deep, spreading beneath the border, connecting both lands. Its branches would grow wide, offering shade to all who sought it, regardless of which side they came from. As they planted the tree, Kola and Zara thought about the night they had first seen each other in the moonlight. How terrified they had been. How certain that their love was impossible. How wrong they had been about so many things. Their love had not started a war. The war had always been waiting to happen, fed by centuries of suspicion and an ancient entity that thrived on division. What their love had done was expose the lie, force both peoples to confront the cost of their hatred, and ultimately provide the key to ending it. Now, as the sun set on this day of remembrance, Kola and Zara looked out at a world that was slowly, carefully, learning to heal. There was still work to do. There would always be work to do. But for the first time in generations, both peoples faced the future with hope instead of fear. Kola reached for Zara's hand. She took it without hesitation. And in that simple gesture was everything they had fought for, everything they had risked, everything they had won. The moon rose over the baobab trees, just as it had on that first night. But the world beneath it was changed. The border was no longer a line of division, but a bridge of connection. The hatred that had poisoned so many generations was finally beginning to fade. And in the house that stood between two worlds, two lovers held each other close, grateful for the chance they had been given, mindful of the price that had been paid, hopeful for the future that was still being written. The war was over. The love remained. And in that truth was the beginning of everything new.